After some of Japan's biggest successes, the first question people ask isn't who deserves the credit. It's what could we have done better? There's a story about a train that once arrived exactly on time in Japan. No delays, no complaints, no headlines. The passengers stepped off and went on with their day, and by every normal measure, the job was already done. But behind the platform, the crew still sat down together. Not to celebrate, to go over the shift, minute by minute. Someone mentioned a small delay while cleaning the platform. Someone else admitted they could have communicated more clearly during the handoff. Nothing had gone wrong. They searched anyway. To most outsiders, this looks unnecessary. If the result was good, why look for mistakes? Because they weren't looking for mistakes. They were looking for growth, the kind that only shows up once you stop assuming a good outcome means there's nothing left to learn. That quiet habit has a name, Hansei. Hansei is usually translated as self-reflection, but that translation loses the sharpest part of it. Reflection can simply mean remembering what happened. Hansei asks something more uncomfortable. What part of this belongs to me? Notice what's missing from that question. It doesn't ask who else was responsible, whether life was fair or whether other people did worse. It starts with the one part of the story you can actually change, your own. That's why Hansei shows up everywhere in Japan, from classrooms to factories to family dinner tables. After the Second World War, Japanese manufacturers built it directly into their culture of improvement. At companies like Toyota, a team doesn't stop meeting once a project succeeds. If anything, that's exactly when they meet again, in a separate room from the one where they celebrate, because gratitude and analysis don't mix well together. Praise tends to bury the very lessons a team most needs to hear. The goal was never guilt. It was clarity. And clarity, unlike guilt, actually points somewhere useful the next morning. This is where Hansei quietly parts ways with how most of us handle a bad day. When something goes wrong, we usually swing toward one of two extremes. We blame ourselves for everything, or we blame everyone but ourselves. Neither one teaches us much, because self-blame turns into shame, and blaming others turns into comfort. Hansei chooses a third path. It asks you to look honestly at yourself without being cruel about it. Say you forgot a close friend's birthday. One response is guilt, I'm a terrible friend. Another is defense, they forgot mine once too. Hansei sounds different. It asks, I didn't make time for something that mattered. What can I change so it doesn't happen again? The difference looks small on paper, but it changes everything in practice. One answer attacks who you are. The other improves what you do next. You don't need to live in Kyoto for this to matter. You probably get a chance to practice it today. Picture leaving a meeting that went well. Your manager thanked you. Everyone smiled. And normally that's exactly where the story would end. Hansei adds one quiet question on the drive home. What could I have done 5% better? Not because today wasn't enough, but because tomorrow deserves today's lesson. Or picture an argument with someone you love, hours later, still replaying in your head. The old question is, why were they so unfair? Hansei gently turns it around. At what moment did I stop listening? Suddenly, the replay isn't about winning the argument anymore. It's about understanding your own part in it, which is the only part you can actually walk back into tomorrow and fix. The same shift works on habits that keep quietly failing. Maybe you've promised yourself for months that you'll exercise before work, and Monday morning you hit snooze again. Most people either judge themselves for it or shrug it off completely. Hansei just stays curious. Were your shoes by the door? Did you sleep too late the night before? Was the goal itself unrealistic to begin with? It investigates the system around the failure, not your character. And that's precisely why it tends to work. Shame usually ends in quitting. Curiosity usually ends in a small adjustment. And small adjustments are what long lives are quietly built from. The same instinct behind why so many elders in Okinawa, one of the longest living populations on Earth, check in with their own bodies every single morning. Not out of worry, but out of habit. Nudging something slightly before it ever becomes a real problem. Reflection on its own isn't the finish line, though. In Japan, Hansei is rarely left as a private thought. It's followed by one small, visible action, and the action doesn't need to be dramatic to count. Writing tomorrow's list before bed, leaving your phone outside the bedroom, packing lunch the night before so tomorrow's tired version of you doesn't have to decide anything at all. Until it changes tomorrow in some small way, a reflection is just an interesting thought that quietly disappears by morning. We live in a culture obsessed with confidence, and Hansei quietly redefines what that word even means. Confidence was never about pretending you're always right. It's trusting yourself enough to admit calmly when you weren't, without that admission turning into self-punishment. That kind of honesty rarely gets posted anywhere. Nobody shares the 5 minutes they spent last night asking what they'd do differently. Yet those invisible minutes shape tomorrow far more than yesterday's applause ever will. The people who keep growing usually aren't the most talented in the room. Often they're simply the ones willing to end each day with one honest sentence. I can do that a little better. Not because they think they're never enough, but because they believe tomorrow's version of themselves deserves today's honesty. That might be the quietest form of optimism there is. What's one small moment from today that taught you something about yourself? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more practical Japanese philosophies that make everyday life calmer and more intentional, subscribe to Bet Everyday 1976. Because sometimes the smallest reflection changes the direction of an entire life.